Look with me at Kings, 2 Kings tonight, a familiar passage. I don't know that I've used it. I don't have a date by it, but it goes along with the Lord and how He blesses us, how He watches over us, how He'll meet our needs. I can think of the times as well when if it was going to get done, the Lord had to do it. If there was going to be healing, the Lord had to do it. If there was going to be peace, the Lord had to do it because nothing else could. Look with me at chapter 4 of 2 Kings, and I'm sure you'll recognize the story in 2 Kings chapter 4. And this was about the widow who had nothing other than trust. She had nothing other than faith, and the only thing she knew is when all else fails, I can turn to the Lord. Other than that, I don't have anything, and that's what she says here. It says, now there cried a certain woman, and certain woman lets us know that this is not a parable. This was a real family. There was a certain woman who cried, and she said, there was a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets unto Elisha, saying, said to Elisha, what they're saying here is, hey, Elisha, my husband worked with you. He was one of the prophets. He was one of the preachers that worked with you. And she said, he was a servant to you and to the Lord. He says, thy servant, my husband, is dead. And she says, now, and Elijah, you know that my husband, or you know that thy servant did fear the Lord. He loved the Lord, and he worked for the Lord. And she told Elisha, you know that this is true, that he loved the Lord and that he feared the Lord. And she says, but here's what's going on in my life now. She said, and the bill collector or the creditor is come. He came knocking on her door. The IRS came knocking on her door, and he came and she said to him that he's going to take my two sons to be bondmen. I tell you what, I'll bet credit card debt wouldn't be near as high as it is today if you didn't pay your bill. Somebody come and was taking your kids as bondmen. Things would change a lot. But this is what she said. Hey, the creditor is at the door. He is come. And he's going to take my sons into slavery. The law allowed that if you had a debt, the Mosaic law allowed that if you had a debt and you couldn't pay it, that the creditors could come and for a period of time, those that were unable to pay, they had to work it off. And so that's what she said. Hey, they're here. They're at my door. They're going to take my sons. What in the world am I going to do? My husband was a servant of God. He worked with you, but now we have nothing. And what am I to do? So she came to Elisha and asked these things. And you can imagine her state of mind. You can just imagine she was at her wit's end. What in the world am I going to do? I'm not strong enough to keep them out. Law says I have to let them take my sons, and she would have done that. She says that's what the law says I have to do. Where do I turn? I can't. Can you imagine the mother who is there and she's helpless, and she knows she's helpless. She has no alternative, no other course of action other than to say, here's my two sons, take them. My husband is dead. All my life I have given. My husband has given, and now he's dead. What am I to do? Can you put it's like when Delaney was there in the hospital bed. There's not a thing in the world you could do. Nothing. You depend totally on somebody else. And that's where she was. And in her case, she didn't have, who was she going to depend on? She didn't have anyone. And it doesn't say how old her sons were. just based on the way the scripture is written, they probably weren't very old. They were youngsters. Otherwise, they could have went to work or something and paid off the debt. So I expect that they were youngsters, and here the creditors are come to take them. And you know when the husband died, you know the increased load that was on her. Now I've got these two boys here, and how am I going to feed them? What am I going to do? You realize that she was a widow of the preacher. She was the wife of one of the sons of the prophets, and we notice that who this preacher, what some of the things that it doesn't say is what it tells you about the preacher. He wasn't he didn't have any money saved up. Apparently he lived by faith. He lived on what the Lord would provide him with. He gave the rest of it away, or he lived week to week by what somebody else gave him, because that's what they did. Remember when Paul left, he would go into a city and he'd find a house that people would welcome him in. He'd stay there and they'd feed him. All of the disciples did exactly the same thing. When the Lord told them to go, he said, don't take spare clothes. Don't take spare staff. Take what you've got on your back and go. I'll meet your needs. I'll take care of it. He said, don't worry about those things. I've got this. I feed the sparrows. I'll take care of you. Just go. And so they did. And they didn't have an ox with a cart or a donkey with a cart behind them, carrying around the things that they would need to make it. We take off for a weekend. And I can put it all in a Walmart bag and take it. Dorcas has 2 suitcases and a carry-on. One Vera Bradley bag is nothing but makeup, hair dryer, a hair curler, another hair thing that you can hold, and it beeps when you've held it there long enough to straighten that particular part. You sit there like it, and it's beep, and you quit, and you go to another spot, beep, and do that, and then you get the curler thing, and you wrap it in it, and you hold it a little bit, and then it'll make a different sound. And then you got the blow dryer, but you don't do it on hot because that'll damage your hair, so you put it on medium. So you just sit there and do all that. And
you know all this stuff.
40 years, I've seen it every day. I can tell you exactly when she's going to brush her teeth, because she does the same thing every morning, and you do not get her out of sequence. And I'll know. Okay, she's getting ready to go to the medicine cabinet and get the toothpaste out. And so I'll go on over there and it's getting the medicine cabinet, get my shaver, not get ready to shave, and she'll stand there and wait. She can't go on to putting on her whatever comes next. She has to wait till after she brushes her teeth before that next thing goes on. It's exactly the same thing every morning. She gets outside, she puts her lotion on, she goes to the closet. And if step 3 doesn't come after step 2, she stops and waits. It is done. She can't get dressed if you mess her up. And I'll lay there, I say, you're getting ready to brush your teeth, aren't you? She just look at it. I say, now you're getting ready to put the stuff on your face. And there's going to be 3 drops over here and 4 drops on this side, because this side has got a mole on it. And then the brush comes out. And you put, we've been together 40-some years, so I know what she's going to do, and I know what order she's going to do it. But when we leave, she'll have that Vera Bradley bag with all those tools in it. And when we travel, I'll take some wrenches, I'll put them in the car in case something happens. She takes her tools. And so she has that bag, and then she's got medicine or a little medicine bag. There's Imodium AD. You got to have that. You never know what's going to happen here. And you got sanitizer wipes. You got to have that. You got there's headache stuff. There's etc. And just on and on. So I mean, she can't just pack little stuff. It's just enormous. And then I got my Walmart bag, and we'll go. Well, that's what they were doing here, and what the Lord told the disciples. Don't take anything. Nothing. Don't pack a lunch. I got a Coleman cold pack, and if we're going to Covington, I'll have a 6-pack of drinks in there, plus some Nabs beef jerky, Hershey's with almonds. I put almonds because she won't eat them, and then some Nabs. And that's just to go, to town. But they don't take anything. They don't take anything, Lord said. Just go. Well, what do I take, Lord? Take the Word. Take my spirit that is in you, and I got the rest of it. And so they went. They didn't take a spare set of sandals with them or nothing. These prophets depended totally upon the Lord, and for their housing, for what they ate, for what they drank, everything. And so that seemed like it was the way that it was throughout the scripture. That's what the Lord told him. I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. I'll supply all your needs according to my riches and glory. I own the cattle of 1,000 hills. What are you worried about? And so that's true. That's the way they went. But here we see that he has died. And so what has the wife depended upon him who depended upon the Lord? He feared the Lord to meet the needs. And I'm sure the Lord met the needs, but now he's gone, and how is she supposed to survive? How is she supposed to meet the needs? And the creditors are come to take her children, and she has this increased load, and so what can she do? The government has come to her door, and they're going to collect. That's what it is. And she told Elisha, my husband was faithful, and he was fearless because he trusted you. He didn't save money. He knew you was going to meet needs. But yet we see a couple problems here now. The problems of life, death, and the burdens of life, death and debt. And she had those and was concerned about what she's going to do. And the creditors coming to foreclose, and she didn't have anything but her children. So what does she do? She does the only thing that she could do. She went to seek the wisdom and the help of God. And what is one of the things that I notice in here is in between verse 1 and verse 2, she didn't go somewhere else and ask to borrow money. She didn't seek somebody else's opinion. She didn't. The first thing that she did was she turned to God. She turned to Elisha and asked him what to do. In verse 2, she says, she listens to what Elisha says. He says, and Elisha said unto her, hey, what shall I do for thee? Tell me, he says, what hast thou in the house? And she said, she validates, she says, thine handmaiden hath not anything in the house save a pot of oil. I've got, when I read that, I was thinking about, this woman says, I don't have anything in my house save a pot of oil. Now I know they'd take, if she could get a little bit of grain or a little bit of flour or something, she'd mix that with the oil and she could make bread or something. But she says, I got nothing. Can you imagine you're in a position like that? I guarantee you I can go to any house here and I can eat my fill. You all will have, you got food galore, you got food in the freezer, you probably got 2 freezers with food in it in case one of them goes bad, and you got snickerdoodles hid somewhere, But your house is full of stuff, and we'll spend $300 or $400 a week in groceries, and the house is plumb full of stuff. This woman says, "There's nothing save a pot of oil in the house." I picture that house, that cabin, with the stucco cabin with the primitive furniture in it, and some cups and some clay pots. And whatever they used for plates, if they had any pottery whatsoever. But the cupboards are empty, and she's got 2 kids. And because she says, "The handmaiden hath not anything in the house. I got 1 pot of oil," she says. That's what I had. And so, but she knew where to turn. She knew who to ask. She knew where to take her problems. And so Elisha said to her, he says, "Now here's what I want you to do." He thought about the problem, and he asked her what to do. I asked her for stuff in the house, and he didn't have any. So he says, "This is what I want you to do." He says, "Go borrow the vessels abroad of all thy neighbors." Empty ones, he said, even empty vessels. Borrow not a few. Get a bunch of them. Get whatever that you can get, empty vessels. Send the boys out and tell them that you want to borrow some empty vessels. And so she did that. And she says, "Now, when your boys come back with the vessels and you get yours," he said, "I want you to come into your house." He says in verse 4, "And when thou art come in," he says, "you come into the house." He says, "Shut the door upon thee and upon thy sons." You remember how it was in Exodus when they were told to put the blood over the door, and they put the blood over the door, and they went in and they shut the door and they eat unleavened bread, and they stayed right there in the house. They didn't venture out, and they heard the death angel come. They heard the screams of the streets, and they heard the prophecy or the words of Moses being fulfilled. But they were protected because they were inside the door and there was blood over the top of it. And when he told her to go in and shut the door. That reminded me of that. And I was reminded of how when Noah went in and once his family got in and the door was shut, and outside the door was the flood, the destruction of the entire earth. But he and his family were safe inside. And then I thought, when Christ says, "I am the door, he that entereth by me." And so now it helped me understand a little bit how the Lord says, "I am the door." And then he says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock." And so that just jumped out a little bit at me, because he said, "Just shut the door upon thee and thy sons." And he says, "Now, once you get inside there, here's what I want you to do." He said, "Now pour out into all those vessels, and thou shalt set aside that which is full." I don't know why he gave her that particular direction, but he did. He said, "Now you take your pot of oil," and basically what he says, and you line these other ones up. You got all of them here, and you take your pot of oil, and I want you to pour it out. And when you fill that one up, he said, set it aside. He told her, give her explicit directions, set it aside. And he said, just keep pouring till they all get full, and set them aside. That's what he told her to do. And you notice that she didn't say, "Well, I don't have but one pot. I don't have but one vessel." Nowhere in this there's just no question. If you tell me to do something like that, I'm gonna say, "Now, Tommy, that ain't gonna work. I've just got this one here. Why are you making me do all this?" That's like trying to shoot this shell in this gun. It didn't make sense. You tell me something like that doesn't compute. Even I can figure out. She said to me earlier, "I just have this one vessel. She says, I hath not anything in the whole house save a pot of oil. She didn't ask any questions. He says, you pour out into all those vessels. And Elisha already knew. He says, poured out into all of them and set aside that which is full. And verse 5 says, so she went in from him and she shut the door upon her and her 2 sons, did exactly what he told her to do. She didn't deviate what she was told to do. She didn't question the fact that he told her to do something that was impossible. Just because she couldn't see it with these eyes, the man of God said to do it this way, and he'd already told her to pour it in all these vessels, and she heard him. She heard him say that, but she didn't question what was going on. She just went and got it, and then she shut the door upon her and her sons, who brought the vessels to her. They went and collected them, and she poured out. And it came to pass, as the next thing she noticed, when the vessels were full. So all the vessels were full, and she said to her son, bring me yet another vessel. She said, Steve, go get me another one. And he says, Mom, he says, there is not a vessel more. And then the oil ceased. The oil stayed. The oil ceased. We see that all of her vessels were full. And how do you explain that? Obviously, God intervened, and he honored the word of Elisha, who honored the husband of the preacher boy who was there. And he says that all of them were full. All of them were full. There wasn't another one there, and that not until they were all filled did the oil cease. Then she came and told the man of God. Then she came and told Elisha. And he says, go sell the oil, pay the debt, and live, thou and thy children, of the rest. He told her to sell enough or give him the oil, what he needs to take care of his debt, because that was a valuable commodity at that time. And he says, and then live thou and thy children on the rest. Apparently, just based on the way that I read it, that it was enough to live for quite some time, if not the rest of their life on it, if she did it right. The Lord had taken care of that burden because she trusted in him, and she didn't question it. But he told her that just live on what you have, and so that's what she did. So the woman, she never questioned it. She knew where to turn, and when she was at the end of her rope, the Lord intervened and took care of her and her sons. So we see that the miracle that was to that woman, and it says that she apparently had enough to live on, and so her burdens were lifted. I think about how God answered that prayer, how he did the impossible, how we see so often that he does the impossible in our lives, how when doors are closed, God makes another avenue to get things done. We see what God can do with a boy's lunch, with a little bit of fish and a little bit of bread. We see what God can do with Moses' rod. We see what he can do with a little sling with a rock in it, where if little is much, if God is in it. And we see the faith that this woman had. She trusted in what Elisha told her. She trusted in the Lord. You notice that Elisha said, don't just go get a couple. He says, think big. Don't borrow a few. Get them all. Expect the answer. The reason she didn't question is because she knew, she feared the Lord. She knew that God was going to answer her prayer in the hour of need. And she did just exactly what Elisha said to do, knowing that the Lord was going to answer that. Our God has, what was it today? All because of Calvary. Our God has boundless resources, and the only limit is us. If I could be like her, life would be so much better. God is limited by us, our unbelief, our thinking, our asking, our prayers sometimes are too small. Our expectations are limited. We don't believe that God can do it. You know, I find what I'm guilty of. And maybe you're the same way. I was talking this morning about how I believe the Lord's coming, but I think Jesus is coming, and I think it could be tomorrow. But to get that from the intellectual part, or to get that from my head to my heart, to where it changes my life, is my problem. And the same way with this woman here, she believed too that God could take care of her in her hour of need. She did something about it. And she trusted God for it. And it's like the guy that is praying for rain. It's one thing to pray for rain, but it's another thing to go ahead and till and put the seed in the ground and knowing that God is going to give rain. She didn't question whether God was going to meet her need. Not she knew He was going to. She went and got the empty vessels. She's sitting there. Her kids are about to be taken. She's got nothing in the house. And some guy says, here's what I want you to do. With the few moments you have left before your sons are taken away, I want you to go get a bunch of empty Tupperware jugs and bring them home. What a stupid thing to say. But she says, okay, boys, let's go. Why? Because my God is greater than any problem that you can have. And that's where I fall short. I believe, I really do. I believe God can fill those jugs. But for me to step out and go get them and bring them back, knowing that there's not but that one little one there, and I'm going to bring back big jugs, I don't do that. That's where my faith is short. That's where I am missing the mark. And I think many times as Christians, we're all that way. I believe that God created the world. I believe that He can do anything. My problem is getting that to the point where I believe He will do something. Not that He can, but that He will do. And I think that's because my faith is weak. And so I think, why is my faith so weak? And I can only say, at least in my life, it's because my relationship with Him is not like it should be. And the reason for that in my life is because my refrigerator is full. I depend on myself, and I don't depend on Him. She had nothing. My house is empty, save this pot of oil. All she had was Him. And I think that's where we are inhibited in our lives many times. We depend on self. We depend on other things. And it's not until we get to that point where nothing is left that we turn to God. And then we don't do it with faith, believing. We do it because that's the only place we have left to go. When it should be that I am ready to go get that empty jug. Regardless of what I have at home, regardless of what I have in myself, regardless of what the world can do, forget that I need to trust in God. I need my relationship to be such that when I come into that place in life where nothing else will work, I'm already there to where I can trust in God, lean not on my own understanding, but acknowledge Him in all ways and allow Him to direct my path. And I think that's where I miss out on so much. It's that point right there. My relationship is measured only by what I intellectually know and not what I should be. In other words, I don't trust God like I should. I don't believe him like I should. I don't lean on him like I should. I don't have the faith that I should. And yet I know that the way to get that is to submit, to fear, to communicate, to pray, to submit, to fear, to communicate with him, and to seek his face. And I miss having that relationship. And I believe most of us as Christians, we're the same way. We miss that part. And there's so much holding us back that we can't get to that point to where we just haul off and believe in the God of heaven that he will do what he can do. And